The November wind swept through the streets of Chicago's South Side with a brutal chill that cut straight to the bone, carrying with it the first flurries of snow from Lake Michigan. It was the kind of early winter evening where darkness fell like a curtain before dinner time, painting the city in shades of steel, gray, and bruised purple as flickering streetlights struggled against the gloom. Inside Rosie's diner, the warmth was a fragile sanctuary against the bitter cold outside. The small establishment sat on the corner of Halsted Street and 47th, a neighborhood fixture for over 35 years. Its cracked leather booths told stories of better days. The Formica counter was stained with decades of coffee rings, and the linoleum floor, once a cheerful pattern of yellow and white, had faded to a tired beige. But there was something honest about the place, something stubbornly real, that the gentrified cafes creeping into other parts of Chicago couldn't touch. Elena Carter moved between tables with the efficiency of someone who had learned that stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant drowning. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame a face too thin, too pale, with shadows beneath her blue-gray eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. At 27, she looked older not from age, but from the kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones when you've been running on empty for too long. Her hands were rough and cracked from washing dishes, her sneakers held together with duct tape, and her uniform carried the ghost of stains that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she scrubbed. "More coffee, Mr. Kowalski?" she asked, approaching an elderly man hunched over the counter, his arthritic fingers wrapped around a chipped mug. "You're too good to us, Ellie," the old man replied, his Polish accent thick with warmth. "You remind me of my daughter." Elena smiled, a real smile that softened the weariness in her eyes and refilled his cup. These moments, these small kindnesses exchanged between strangers who had become something like family, were the only things that made the 18-hour days bearable. But beneath her calm exterior, her mind was spiraling through calculations she'd been trying to outrun all week. Lily's asthma medication was due in 2 days, $340 she didn't have. Lucas needed money for his college application fees. The landlord had taped another eviction notice to their door this morning. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Derek's voice echoed, "You can't survive without me, Ellie. You'll come crawling back, Mrs." Nguyen shuffled in from the cold, snow dusting her gray hair, pulling her worn shopping cart behind her. "Elena, child," she said in her soft Vietnamese accent, pressing a warm container into Elena's hands. "Leftover pho. You eat." "Too skinny." The unexpected kindness made Elena's throat tighten. "Mrs. Nguyen, you don't have to." "Your mother," the old woman interrupted gently, patting Elena's cheek with a weathered hand. "She watching you from heaven. She want you to eat." The mention of her mother sent a familiar blade of grief through Elena's chest. 4 years gone, and some nights it still felt like she was sitting beside that hospital bed, holding a hand that grew colder by the hour. Cancer had stolen her mother piece by piece, and Elena had been there for every terrible moment, learning to change IV bags, to crush pills into applesauce, to hold someone through pain when there was nothing left to do but witness. Those skills, forged in the darkest chapter of her life, had never left her. By 11:47, the diner had emptied into silence. Elena began her closing routine, wiping down the foggy glass door, her reflection a ghost staring back at her. Outside, the snow fell heavier now, muffling the city into an eerie quiet. She was just reaching up to flip the open sign to closed when she heard it, the scream of tires on ice, the sickening crunch of metal folding like paper, the explosion of shattering glass. Elena's head whipped toward the street just in time to see a black Mercedes Maybach spinning out of control, its headlights slicing wildly through the snow. It jumped the curb, clipped a fire hydrant, and slammed into a light pole 20 meters from the diner with a thunderous crash that rattled the windows in their frames. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The old jukebox fell silent mid-song. Steam and smoke rose from the crumpled hood like dying breath. Elena's hand was still frozen on the door handle. Then instinct, the same instinct that had kept her mother alive for 3 extra months, that had talked Lucas down from panic attacks, that had held Lily through countless asthma attacks in the dead of night, took over. "Call 911. She screamed to no one as she yanked the door open and plunged into the biting cold. The snow stung her face as she ran. The driver, a large man in a black suit, was slumped against the steering wheel, blood trickling from his temple. Unconscious, but breathing. But it was the movement in the back seat that seized her heart. A child, a little girl, no more than 6 years old, with long dark hair and the widest gray eyes Elena had ever seen, eyes filled with pure terror. She was struggling against her seatbelt, small fists pounding against the window, screaming one word over and over, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." Beside her, A man in an expensive suit lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his head. Elena didn't think. She just moved. She had no idea that the unconscious man bleeding in the back seat was Dominic Valentino, the most powerful and dangerous mafia boss in Chicago, and that by saving his daughter's life tonight, she would set into motion a chain of events that would either destroy everything she had left or give her something she never dared to dream of. Our story begins to open a path into the hearts of those who are listening. This quiet moment becomes a small pause before we step deeper into the emotional journey ahead. And here, right at this threshold, I want to offer you a gentle message, something that helps us continue bringing warm, dramatic human stories to more people each day. If you are listening right now, I invite you to take a single second to subscribe to our channel, to press like, and to share this video with someone you care about. Your support does more than help the story travel farther. It becomes the quiet strength that allows us to keep creating scenes and moments that reach into the tender places of the heart. And where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment with the name of your city, your country, or wherever you are hearing this story, so we can know the corners of the world that Elena and Mia's small journey has touched on this evening. We truly cherish every word you share with us. Now then, let us return to that fateful night, the moment when the lives of 3 people collided not only in an unexpected accident, but in the way they would alter one another's destiny forever. Elena rushed toward the crushed car, her bare hands trembling in the skin cutting cold, though she did not notice it at all, and the rear door on the little girl's side was jammed tight from the impact. The metal frame warped and twisted out of shape. She gripped the handle and pulled once, then twice, and on the third attempt she poured the last of her exhausted strength into her arms, until the door tore open, with a high screech that cut through the frozen air. The child was still crying, her gray eyes swimming in tears as she looked at Elena as though she were the only light inside a nightmare. "It is all right. I am here now," Elena said, her voice strangely calm, the same tone she had practiced over hundreds of sleepless nights at her mother's bedside. She reached in, her fingers searching for the latch of the seatbelt that held the small body in place, pressed firmly until it released, and the little girl immediately threw herself into Elena's arms, clinging as if letting go would cause the entire world to collapse. Elena held the child against her chest, feeling the violent tremors running through the tiny body, hearing the muffled sobs against her ear. "Daddy! Daddy will not wake up," the girl cried, her voice breaking. Elena looked toward the man, still slumped, motionless in the seat beside her, blood from the wound on his head seeping down the collar of his white vest and staining a wide patch red, and her heart tightened. She placed the girl on the front seat where it was safer, then turned to the man again, and the old skills from 4 years ago rushed back as though they had never left, guiding her hands as they moved automatically. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse, and felt the faint yet steady beat beneath the skin. He was alive. The wound on his head was bleeding heavily, and she knew head wounds often looked worse than they were, but he still needed pressure immediately. Without hesitation, Elena pulled off the apron that had followed her through 12 hours of work, folded it into a thick pad, and pressed it against the wound. The blood seeped through the fabric, warm against her fingertips, but she did not flinch. She had done this many times before, when her mother's nose bled from chemotherapy, when she changed dressings after surgery, when she had to keep calm during moments that would have sent anyone else into panic. "Hold this for me," she told the little girl gently, guiding those tiny hands to press down on the makeshift compress. "You are doing so well. You are helping your father." The child obeyed, her eyes still swollen with tears, though her sobs softened into small hiccups. Elena used her free hand to check the man for other injuries, and noticed the angle of his arm looked slightly off, possibly broken, though there was no external bleeding. She glanced toward the driver in the front, a large man in a black vest, still unconscious but with his chest rising and falling. Snow began drifting into the car through the open door, sharp and cold as 1,000 needles, and the child began shivering harder, her lips pale from cold and shock. Elena knew she had to keep her warm and calm until the ambulance arrived, so she slipped off her thin cardigan, the only coat she owned, and wrapped it around the girl. "What is your name, sweetheart?" she asked softly, trying to pull the child's focus toward her voice rather than the terror around them. "Am Mia," the girl whispered. "Mia? That is a beautiful name." "My name is Elena. Would you like me to sing to you?" The little girl nodded, tears still falling. And there, inside a wrecked car beneath the winter night, with her father unconscious beside her, Elena began to sing. It was the song her mother had sung to her when she was small, the song she had sung to Lily during frightening asthma attacks, the song she had whispered at her mother's bedside during the final hours. Her voice was not beautiful, roughened by exhaustion and cold, yet it carried a truth so gentle, so human, that Mia stopped crying, her wide gray eyes fixed on Elena as though she truly were an angel, not one made of wings and light, but one made of breathing warmth and simple kindness. "Are you an angel?" Mia asked in a trembling whisper. Elena smiled, the first real smile she had managed in days. "No, sweetheart, I am just a waitress." But to Mia, in that moment, Elena Carter was the only angel she had ever known. The distant wail of an ambulance pierced through the silent snow, and Elena exhaled in relief, unaware that this night was only the beginning. The ambulance skidded to a stop, its brakes screeching, red and blue lights flashing through the thick curtain of snow and washing the street in urgent color, and two paramedics jumped out, racing toward the crushed vehicle with a stretcher and heavy medical bags. Elena kept pressing the apron to the man's head while holding Mia close, her body numb from the cold, yet she refused to let go. "You did very well," one of the paramedics said as he reached her, gently replacing her hands with sterile gauze. "You applied pressure exactly right." Elena nodded and stepped back, but Mia immediately wrapped her arms around Elena's neck, her small legs clinging tight as if afraid she would be taken away. "No, Mia will not go. Mia wants to stay with the angel," she cried, her voice sharp with terror. A female paramedic approached, trying to coax her gently. "Sweetheart, you need to go with your father. He needs you beside him." But Mia shook her head violently, burying her face into Elena's shoulder, her tears soaking through the thin fabric, and she sobbed as though being separated from Elena meant losing the last safe thing in this awful night. Elena felt her heart crack open. She knelt down in the snow, the icy ground seeping through her knees, lifted Mia's small face and looked into those tear-filled gray eyes. "Mia, listen to me," she said softly but firmly. "Your father needs you. He is hurt, and when he wakes up, the very first person he will want to see is you. Do you understand?" The girl hiccuped, her lower lip trembling. "But what if you go away? What if Mia never sees you again?" The question of a 6-year-old pierced straight through Elena, stirring memories of Lily crying in fear during asthma attacks, of Lucas at 13 asking why their mother had to leave. She understood the terror of losing someone, the instinct to cling to a stranger who offered even a flicker of warmth in the dark. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn handkerchief, the last keepsake her mother had left her, embroidered with the letter M at the corner, its pale blue faded with time. She placed it into Mia's hand and folded the tiny fingers around it. "This belonged to my mother," Elena said softly, her voice caught in her throat. "She gave it to me before she went to heaven. It is very important to me. Now I am giving it to you to keep, and I promise I will come back for it. Do you understand? I promise I will see you again." Mia looked down at the handkerchief, then up at Elena, her eyes still red yet no longer crying. "You promise?" "I promise," Elena whispered, smiling even as her lips were turning blue from the cold. "And I always keep my promises." Mia hugged the handkerchief to her chest and finally allowed the paramedic to lift her onto the small stretcher beside her father. The man was still unconscious, an oxygen mask placed over his face, bandages wrapped around his head. Elena stood watching as they loaded both father and daughter into the ambulance, and Mia kept turning back to look at her, clutching the handkerchief as if it were treasure. The doors closed, the siren wailed, and the vehicle sped away into the white snow, its lights fading until they vanished around the corner. Elena stood alone in the winter night of Chicago, snow gathering on the thin fabric of her clothes, her body shaking uncontrollably. She looked toward the direction where the ambulance had disappeared, her chest strangely hollow. She did not know the man's name, did not know which hospital they were going to, did not know if she would ever see the gray-eyed child again. But she had made a promise, and Elena Carter, no matter how brutal life had been, had never broken one. She turned toward the diner, still glowing with warm lights, walking across snow already rising to her ankles, heading back to the job that waited for her. Behind her, the bloodstains on the ground were slowly covered by white snow, as though the night had never happened at all. Yet Elena knew that something had changed. Elena stepped into the diner, the door chime giving a faint, tired ring as though it too had reached its limit, and the warmth inside washed over her frozen body in a way that hurt rather than comforted, as blood struggled to move again through veins that felt nearly frozen solid. She looked down at herself, at the blotches of dried and smeared blood staining her uniform, at the apron she had left somewhere out by the crushed car, at her hands with dark lines of dried blood caught beneath her nails. She walked to the sink behind the bar, turned on the faucet, and began to scrub. The water was as cold as ice, But she did not wait for warmth. She scrubbed harder and harder until her skin flushed red and the stranger's blood swirled away down the drain. Yet she still felt it on her hands, that warm and slick sensation lingering as if it had seeped into her skin. Elena drew a deep breath and forced herself back into the present. There was work to finish. She took a spare apron from the employee locker, tied it around her waist, and resumed closing the diner, wiping tables, stacking chairs, counting the register, logging the day's sales. Every action moved on muscle memory, familiar enough that she could perform them as her mind drifted somewhere far away. Mia's gray eyes kept appearing in her thoughts, her small voice calling her an angel still echoing softly. She wondered how the little girl was now, whether her father had woken, whether they were safe, but she had no way of knowing. She was only a waitress, a passerby who had happened to be in the right place at the worst possible moment. The clock on the wall showed 1:45 when Elena locked the diner door, switched off the lights, and stepped outside. The snow had stopped, but the wind still sliced through the night like a blade. She had no coat, her only cardigan wrapped around Mia and likely lying somewhere in a hospital now. She crossed her arms tightly, lowered her head, and began the walk home. 15 minutes through the bitter wind, past empty dark streets and alleys she knew by heart, places where no one asked questions after 10 at night, and where the wail of police sirens served as a nightly lullaby. Elena had lived on the South Side her whole life. She knew every crack in the sidewalks, every broken street lamp no one bothered to fix. Her apartment sat on the 4th floor of an old building that should have been demolished 10 years ago. The elevator long dead, the stairwell damp and dim, heavy with the smell of mildew. Elena climbed slowly, each step weighted with a fatigue that had long surpassed exhaustion. She opened the apartment door as quietly as possible. Inside, darkness pressed close, broken only by the thin beam of a street lamp leaking through a torn curtain. The room was small enough to feel like the walls were breathing down her neck. A worn double bed where Lucas and Lily lay curled beneath blankets. A frayed sofa where Elena slept each night. A tiny kitchen corner with a sink that dripped steadily, and walls mottled with black mold. But this was home, the only place where she could shield her siblings. Elena tiptoed to the bed and watched Lucas and Lily sleeping. Lucas, at 17, still looked like a boy when he slept. His tousled brown hair soft against the pillow, his features delicate like their mother's. Lily, 12 and smaller than her age from chronic asthma, breathed with a faint wheeze even in sleep. Elena stood watching them for a long moment, her chest aching with love and with guilt. She had not given them a better life. She had worked herself past breaking, yet it was never enough. It had never been enough. She backed toward the sofa and sat down in the dark. And for the first time in many months, Elena allowed herself to cry. Not loudly, only silent tears sliding down her cheeks, her shoulders trembling as she tried to stop the sobs. She cried from exhaustion, from loneliness, from losing her mother's handkerchief, from knowing that little gray-eyed girl was somewhere in a hospital without her, from the fear that she would not have money for Lily's medicine tomorrow. But when the first light of dawn crept through the window, Elena wiped her face dry. She had 2 hours to sleep before her next shift. There was no time to be weak. There was no one else to rely on. Only her, and the 2 sleeping children she would protect at any cost. The alarm rang at 5 in the morning, only 2 hours after Elena had fallen asleep. Her body protested every movement as she forced herself upright, her head spinning, her eyelids heavy as if packed with sand. She glanced at the bed where Lucas and Lily slept, their breaths steady in the cold air of a room without working heat. Elena dressed quietly, pulling on her worn janitorial clothes, drank a glass of cold water for breakfast, and left the apartment before sunrise. Her cleaning shift began at 6 in a downtown office building. As always, Elena arrived on time, received her supply cart, and started from the 1st floor. Every motion was heavier than usual, her hands trembling as she gripped the mop, her mind foggy beneath a curtain of fatigue. By the 5th floor, as she wiped down the conference room glass, the world suddenly tilted. Elena grabbed the doorframe, fighting to stay upright, as black spots flickered before her eyes. She sank to the floor, her head pressed between her knees, breathing slowly until the dizziness passed. Little food, little sleep. Her body was at its breaking point. But she did not have permission to collapse. She forced herself up, leaned against the wall briefly, and continued her shift. No one noticed, no one cared, and Elena preferred it that way. She did not need pity. Her shift ended at 10. Elena received her pay envelope, counted quickly in her head, $70, plus 43 from tips last night at the diner, still more than 200 short of Lily's medication. She tucked the money into her pocket and boarded the bus home, hoping for a short nap before her evening shift at Rosie's. But when Elena turned into the narrow alley leading to her building, she froze. Derek Shaw leaned against the wall by the entrance, a cigarette burning low between his lips, his cold blue eyes tracking her like prey. 3 years had passed and he had not changed. Still the neatly combed blonde hair, still the tall, strong frame that once made her feel safe before it became the weapon that terrorized her, still that smile she once loved and later learned to fear. "My Ellie," Derek said, flicking the cigarette to the ground and crushing it beneath his heel. "I knew you had the morning shift. I have been waiting an hour." Elena wanted to turn and run, but her feet felt nailed to the pavement. 3 years ago, she had fled from him on a stormy night with Lucas and Lily, carrying only a bag of clothes and a few $100s. She had changed her number, moved 3 times, erased every trail. But Derek always found her. "I have nothing to say to you," Elena said, forcing her voice not to shake. "Whatever we had ended 3 years ago." Derek stepped closer, every stride pushing Elena backward until her spine hit the cold wall. He planted a hand beside her head and leaned in, his face inches from hers, the smell of smoke and whiskey filling her breath. "You do not get to decide when it ends," he murmured, his voice sweet in a way that chilled the air. "I told you, you cannot live without me. Look at you, thin as a twig, trapped in this dump, working yourself to death. Come back to me and I will give you a better life. I would rather die than go back to you." The words had barely left her mouth before Derek clamped his hand around her wrist, squeezing until Elena winced. She tried to pull away, but he was too strong, the pressure tightening, promising bruises like all the ones before. Still stubborn as ever, Derek growled, the sweetness vanishing, revealing the monster beneath. "I will teach you. Let go of my sister." Lucas's voice cut through the alley. Elena turned, her heart seizing as she saw her 17-year-old brother advancing, pale with fear and fury, his fists clenched as if ready to fight a man twice his size. "Lucas, go inside," Elena whispered. Derek looked at Lucas and laughed. "Kid is all grown now, huh? Trying to play hero for big sister." Lucas said nothing. He stepped closer, standing beside Elena, eyes locked on Derek. "I will call the police," Lucas said, raising his phone. "I recorded everything from the moment you grabbed her. One more step and this goes straight to the cops and online." Derek glanced at the phone, then at Lucas, then at Elena. Slowly he released her wrist, stepped back, and smirked. "Fine. I will go. But remember this, Ellie. You cannot hide from me forever. I will be back, and next time there will not be a kid to save you." He walked away, his footsteps echoing on the concrete until they vanished around the corner. Elena stood shaking, a bruise already forming on her wrist. Lucas wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time Elena saw that he was no longer the 13-year-old boy crying beside their mother's bed. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Elena nodded, though she did not know if it was true. Derek would return. He always returned. And this time, she no longer knew if she had the strength to run again. Dominic Valentino opened his eyes, and the first thing he felt was the violent pounding in his skull, as if someone were hammering from inside his head, and the harsh white glare above forced his eyes to narrow, while the sharp scent of antiseptic burned in his nose, and the steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the air around him. A hospital. He was in a hospital. Memory returned like a flood, the car skidding on the icy road. Mia's terrified scream, the brutal impact, then darkness. Mia. His heart seemed to stop for a beat. He pushed himself upright despite the tearing pain in his head and the cast around his left arm. "Where is Mia?" he rasped, his voice so hoarse he barely recognized it. "Where is Mia? Sir, calm down." Marco Russo, his right hand for more than 20 years, shot up from the chair beside the bed, the 45-year-old man with salt and pepper hair and a face marked by old scars, placing a steadying hand on Dominic's shoulder, firm but gentle, keeping him from rising. "Mia is fine. Just minor scrapes and a mild concussion. She is sleeping in the room next door and Rosa is with her." Dominic exhaled, his entire body sagging with relief. His daughter was safe. Nothing else mattered. "What is the situation?" he asked, regaining a trace of his usual authority. Marco pulled his chair closer, lowering his voice even though the private suite was heavily guarded. "The car lost control on the slick pavement. No sabotage. Tony is recovering. A head injury, but the doctors say he will be all right. You suffered a head trauma, significant blood loss, and a broken left arm. The doctors say you are very lucky." Dominic nodded, though he knew there was more than luck involved. He remembered a whisper of something, A gentle voice, a lullaby, the faint smell of coffee and vanilla. "Someone saved us," he said slowly, searching through the fog of his memory. "A woman. She bandaged my wound." She sang to Mia. Marco nodded, a flicker of surprise crossing his eyes. "You remember quite a lot." "Yes, there was a woman. A waitress at a diner near the crash site. She ran out the moment she saw the accident, forced the door open, pulled Mia out, stopped your bleeding, and kept the girl calm until the ambulance arrived. Mia called her an angel." Dominic closed his eyes, a faint image of a thin face and gray-blue anxious eyes surfacing in his mind. "What is her name?" "Elena Carter, 27 years old, employed at Rosie's Diner on Halsted Street. I had preliminary information gathered." Marco took out a thin file and set it on the table beside the bed. Dominic lifted it with his right hand, flipping through the pages. A still image from a security camera showed a slender woman in a server's uniform. Chestnut hair pulled into a ponytail. A weary face carrying a stubborn resilience. He read further. "Father died when she was 8. Mother passed from cancer 4 years ago, currently raising 2 younger siblings. A 17-year-old brother and a 12-year-old sister with chronic asthma, working 3 jobs simultaneously. Waitress, office cleaner, weekend babysitter, nearly $50,000 in medical debt from her mother's treatment, at risk of eviction due to unpaid rent." And one detail made Dominic pause for longer than the rest. "Survivor of 2 years of domestic abuse by a former boyfriend named Derek Shaw. Escaped 3 years ago. But he still harasses and threatens her. She lives like this," Dominic murmured, his voice darkening. Marco nodded. "She works 18 to 20 hours a day, sir. And that night she ran out into the snow with no coat. Stood there in the freezing wind until the ambulance came. She gave Mia her mother's handkerchief to hold on to, promised she would come back for it." Dominic looked down at the photograph of Elena Carter. A woman with nothing, no money, no power, not even a coat to keep warm, yet she still threw herself into danger for strangers. She did not know who he was, did not know he could give her anything she wanted. She simply did what was right. "I want to meet her," Dominic said, his voice no longer a request but a command. "And Marco, find everything about this Derek Shaw. I want to know it all." Marco rose. "Anything else, sir?" Dominic turned toward the window where dawn washed the Chicago skyline in soft pink light. "Prepare an appropriate gift. She saved the most precious thing I have. I owe her a life." 3 days passed since that fateful night, and Elena's life continued like a spinning wheel that never stopped. Morning shift cleaning offices, afternoon shift babysitting for the neighbor, evening shift at Rosie's Diner. She tried not to think about Derek and the cold gleam in his eyes when he promised to return. Tried not to think about the gray-eyed little girl holding her mother's handkerchief. Tried not to think about anything except putting one foot in front of the other. It was an ordinary Thursday evening at Rosie's, busier than usual because of the biting cold outside and the need for somewhere warm. Elena was carrying a tray to table 7 when the door chime rang and a rush of cold air swept in. She did not look back, too busy with her task. But she sensed something off when the entire diner fell silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but a tense, suffocating stillness, as if the air had been drained from the room. Elena set the tray down and turned, and she saw them. 3 men stood at the entrance. 2 in black suits, statuesque, expressionless, and between them stood a tall man with black hair streaked with silver at the temples, a sharply angled face with a thin scar above his left eyebrow, his left arm concealed in a cast beneath an expensive cashmere coat. But what made Elena freeze were his eyes, gray like a storm gathering over the horizon, cold yet unfathomably deep, the very eyes she had seen 3 nights earlier on the face of a crying 6-year-old girl. "Mr. Kowalski, a regular at the bar," shot up so quickly he nearly spilled his coffee. "Dominic Valentino," he whispered, his voice trembling, then dropped cash on the counter and rushed out the back door as if the diner were on fire. Other customers stirred in fear, some pushing money onto tables, some lowering their heads, some whispering his name with panic. Elena did not understand. She had never heard of Dominic Valentino, never knew why people reacted with such terror. She only knew those eyes matched Mia's, and that meant he was the man whose wound she had pressed in the falling snow. He stepped toward her with a confident, commanding stride, as though the world itself belonged to him. Tony, the diner's cook, burst out from the kitchen, his face pale. "Mr. Valentino, how can we help you?" he stammered, but Dominic did not even glance at him. His gray eyes were fixed solely on Elena, piercing as if reading every thought she tried to hide. "You are Elena Carter?" he asked, though it sounded more like certainty than a question. Elena swallowed and nodded. Yes. How can I help you? Dominic stopped in front of her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with something sharper, the scent of power and danger. You saved my daughter, he said, his voice cold yet carrying something else beneath it. You ran into the snow without a coat, without hesitation. You kept Mia calm. You tended my wound. You promised my daughter she would see you again. Elena blinked, her heart pounding. Is Mia all right? Was she badly hurt? A flicker of surprise crossed Dominic's eyes as though he had not expected her first words to be about Mia's well-being. Mia is fine, thanks to you. She still keeps the handkerchief you gave her, sleeps with it every night, and will not stop asking when she can see her angel again. Elena felt a warmth rise in her chest. I am glad she is well. She was very brave that night. You were the brave one, Miss Carter. Dominic reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. I came to thank you and to repay what I owe. Inside are $50,000 in cash. If you need more, anything at all, a new home, a better job, a car, just say the word. I will make it happen. Elena looked at the envelope, then into the gray eyes waiting for her reaction. $50,000. Enough to clear her mother's medical debt, enough to buy Lily's medication for years, enough to send Lucas to college, enough to change the course of their lives entirely. But something within her refused. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps the hard lesson Derek had carved into her that nothing in life comes without a price. Or perhaps she simply did not want to owe anything to a man who could make an entire diner tremble. Thank you, sir, Elena said, her voice steady though her heart raced. But I cannot accept it. I did not save Mia for a reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And for the first time in his life, Dominic Valentino, the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago, the man no one dared refuse, found himself without an answer. Dominic stood there with the envelope still in his hand, his gray eyes fixed on Elena, as though she were some unfamiliar creature from another world. For in his life everything had a price and everyone could be bought, and he was accustomed to people bowing to his money and his power, accustomed to the world rearranging itself the moment he lifted a finger. Yet this thin woman in a cheap waitress uniform had just refused $50,000, as if it were nothing more than a handful of loose change. You do not understand, Dominic said, his voice steady yet carrying something else beneath it. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps irritation at being refused. I am not a man who likes to owe anyone. You saved my daughter's life. This is not charity, it is a rightful repayment. Elena shook her head, her gray-blue eyes meeting his without a trace of fear. And I am not someone who sells kindness, she answered quietly. I already told you, I did not do it for money. Mia was a terrified child, and I did what any person with a conscience would do. Not everyone would do the same, Dominic replied, his voice dropping lower. That night, dozens of people passed by before the ambulance arrived. No one stopped. Only you. Elena was silent for a long moment, then asked the only question she truly cared about. Is Mia really all right? I mean, truly all right. Is she having nightmares? Is she afraid of cars now? After a trauma like that, children often suffer more in their minds than in their bodies. Dominic blinked, thrown off guard. No one had asked him about Mia's emotional state, only doctors speaking about her physical injuries, subordinates asking about security, sycophants wanting to impress him. Yet Elena Carter, a woman with nothing, cared about whether his daughter had nightmares. Mia still asks about you, he admitted, his voice softening slightly. Every night before bed she asks when her angel is coming to take back the handkerchief. I think you are the only good thing she remembers from that night. Warmth flickered in Elena's eyes. Please tell Mia that her angel misses her very much, she said gently, and that she was incredibly brave. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, then slid the envelope back into his coat, understanding that forcing her to accept it would only push her farther away, and instead he drew a black business card with silver lettering and placed it on the counter. I respect your decision, he said simply, but if you ever change your mind, or if you need anything at all, call this number, day or night. Elena glanced at the card but did not pick it up. Dominic gave her a small nod, turned, and walked out with his two men following close behind, the door chime ringing as they left, and the glossy black Mercedes outside rolling away into the night. The entire diner exhaled as one, murmurs rising from every corner. Tony hurried to Elena's side, his face pale as paper. Do you know what you just did? He whispered sharply. You just turned down money from Dominic Valentino. Dominic Valentino. Elena frowned. I know he is Mia's father, But who is he that everyone seems terrified of him? Tony scanned the room nervously, then tugged her into the shadowed corner behind the bar. You really do not know. Dominic Valentino is the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago. The Valentino family controls almost everything underground in this city. People say he has killed dozens. They say if he wants someone gone, they disappear without a trace. You just refused the money of one of the most dangerous men in America. Elena felt her blood turn cold. Mafia. She had saved the daughter of a mafia boss. She had refused a reward from a man whispered about like a legend of death. She had looked straight into the eyes of one of the most dangerous men in this city and told him she did not want anything from him. Her hands began to tremble, but not from fear. She looked down at the black card lying on the counter, the silver letters glinting under the diner lights. Do you regret it? Tony asked, voice tight with worry. Elena picked up the card and turned it between her fingers, thinking of Mia, of those gray eyes filled with terror and hope, of the unconscious man whose wound she had held closed under the falling snow, with no idea who he truly was. No, she said softly, her voice calm in a way that surprised even her. I did the right thing, and I will never regret that. She tucked the card into her apron and returned to work, for there were still tables to serve and hours to finish before she could go home. And no matter how much the world tilted, Elena Carter still had to keep moving. A week passed since the night Dominic Valentino had walked into Rosie's diner, and Elena tried to forget the strange encounter. The black card stayed inside the drawer of her nightstand, not discarded but untouched, and life continued with its usual rhythm, shifts stacking on top of shifts, numbers running through her mind, and the constant fear of Derek lingering behind her like a shadow. On Saturday night, her shift ended at midnight. Tony had left early because his wife was ill, and Elena locked the diner alone before stepping into the freezing Chicago air, tightening her thin thrift store coat around her shoulders. She cut through the alley she always used, a shortcut that saved 5 minutes, and on a night this cold 5 minutes mattered. She was halfway through when a figure stepped out from the darkness, blocking her path. Elena froze, her heart plummeting as she recognized the familiar face in the weak street lamp glow. Derek Shaw stood there, eyes bloodshot with alcohol, a crooked grin twisting his mouth. I told you, he slurred. You cannot run from me forever. Elena spun to flee, but she barely moved before Derek lunged, grabbing her hair and yanking her backward. She screamed in pain, clawing at his arm, but he was far stronger. He slammed her against the wall, her face hitting the rough brick, warm blood running down her forehead. 3 years, Derek growled, his breath thick with whiskey. 3 years I waited. 3 years I searched. You think you can leave me without consequences? Let me go, Elena gasped, struggling, and Derek twisted her wrist painfully before striking her across the face, sending her crashing to the ground, her skull smacking the cold concrete and the world spinning with bright spots of light. You are coming back with me, he hissed, grabbing her collar and dragging her upward. Whether you want to or not. You belong to me, Ellie. Forever. Elena tried to call for help, but the blow to her head blurred her senses, trapping her voice into nothing more than a weak whimper. She thought of Lucas and Lily, thought of what would happen to them if she disappeared, and tears slid down her cheeks, mingling with the blood on her skin. Then suddenly the pressure on her collar vanished. She heard a heavy thud, the sound of a body hitting the wall, Derek's cry of pain. She forced her eyes open just enough to see 2 dark figures pinning Derek to the ground, one kneeling on his back, the other twisting his arms behind him. Do not kill him, a familiar voice said sharply. Marco Russo stepped out of the shadows, his scarred face cold as stone as he stared down at Derek writhing on the pavement. The boss wants him alive to face consequences. For now, get out of this city and never come back. Otherwise, next time it will not just be broken bones. The 2 men hauled Derek upright, and Elena heard the crack of something snapping, Derek's scream echoing down the alley, then the dragging steps fading away. Marco knelt beside her, the hardness in his eyes softening. Miss Carter, can you hear me? Elena nodded weakly, dizziness washing over her. You work for Dominic Valentino. Yes, the boss ordered protection for you the moment he left the diner. We have been monitoring Derek Shaw for a while, but tonight he acted faster than expected. I am sorry we did not reach you sooner. Elena wanted to say she did not need protection, that she could manage on her own, but when she tried to stand, her knees buckled and everything blurred, and before she hit the ground, strong arms caught her. Bring the car, Marco commanded. We are taking her to the boss. Elena wanted to protest, wanted to say she needed to go home to Lucas and Lily, but her consciousness drifted like a boat losing its anchor, and the last thing she felt before darkness closed in was the scent of expensive leather and the deep voice of someone on the phone saying they were on their way back to the estate. Elena woke to a dull throb pulsing behind her eyes and the soft scent of lavender drifting through the air, and she blinked several times, trying to understand where she was, staring up at a soaring ceiling adorned with ornate classical patterns, a chandelier glittering with crystal light, deep red velvet curtains, and beneath her a cream leather sofa softer than anything she had ever touched in her life, a setting so far removed from her cramped apartment that it felt like another universe. "You are awake, thank goodness," a middle-aged woman with streaks of silver in her dark hair and a kind, gentle face said as she approached with a damp cloth in her hand. "I am Rosa, housekeeper for the Valentino family. Stay still. Let me change the bandage on your head." Elena tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness pressed her back down, and Rosa placed the cool cloth against her forehead before carefully checking the wound already cleaned and wrapped. "You have a minor head injury, but no stitches needed," she murmured. "The bruising on your face will fade within a few days." Elena looked around again, trying to collect her thoughts, and through the wide window she saw an enormous garden with a marble fountain, perfectly trimmed hedges, and a tall iron gate enclosing the grounds like a fortress, and she realized this was Dominic Valentino's estate, so extravagant it made her feel like a stain on a pure white page. "My brother and sister," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Lucas and Lily, they are home alone. I have to go." "The boss already sent people to watch over them," Rosa reassured her. "They are safe, do not worry." Before Elena could protest, the door opened, and Dominic Valentino stepped inside, wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, the collar slightly open, a stark contrast to the impeccably controlled image he had presented at the diner, although his gray eyes remained the same, sharp as steel, and in this moment burning with a contained fury. "Leave us," Dominic said to Rosa, not as a request but a command, and she nodded and slipped out, closing the door behind her. Dominic stood looking at Elena for a long breath, his jaw tight, the muscles in his arm coiled as if restraining a storm. "Derek Shaw," he said at last, his voice low and dangerous. "He abused you for 2 years, stalked you for 3 more, and tonight he nearly killed you. Why did you not tell me?" Elena pushed herself upright, managing it despite the ache in her skull. "That is not your concern," she answered. "Derek is my problem. I can handle him." "You call being beaten unconscious in a dark alley handling it," Dominic retorted, stepping closer, his gaze drilling into hers. "If my men had not reached you in time, what do you think would have happened?" Elena said nothing, because she knew exactly what would have happened. She had known it for years. She had lived with that fear longer than she cared to admit, yet she had built her life on surviving alone, and did not know how to accept help from anyone, least of all from a Mafia boss she barely knew. "I do not need your protection," she insisted, her voice sharper than she intended. "I do not want to owe anyone, especially someone like you." "Someone like me," Dominic repeated quietly, a fleeting expression crossing his eyes, something that might have been hurt or might have been cold amusement. "What do you think you know about someone like me?" "I know who you are," she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Tony told me. You are Dominic Valentino, the man who controls the underworld in Chicago. People fear you because you are dangerous. I have lived with a dangerous man before. I will not make that mistake again." Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating, until Dominic exhaled, a weary sound she had not expected from a man who carried the world like a weapon. "I am not Derek Shaw," he said softly. "I would never hurt you, but I will not stand by while someone else does. You saved my daughter's life, and I owe you. Let me pay that debt." Elena wanted to reject him again, but something in his gray eyes stopped her. Not threat, not calculation, but something that resembled sincerity. "Derek Shaw will never touch you again," Dominic said, his voice a vow carved from stone. "That is the only thing I ask you to accept. Everything else you are free to refuse." And for the first time in her life, Elena did not know what to say. Before she could answer, small footsteps pattered rapidly down the staircase, quick and excited like the heartbeat of a child, and the door burst open as a tiny whirlwind with long black hair flying behind her sprinted inside. "Angel lady," Mia cried, her wide gray eyes glowing as if she were seeing a miracle, wearing pajamas covered in teddy bears and pink slippers, clutching something Elena recognized instantly, the worn handkerchief embroidered with the letter M. Before Elena could react, Mia flung herself forward, wrapping her little arms tightly around Elena's neck, her face pressing into her shoulder. "Mia knew you would come. Mia knew it," she declared, her voice trembling with joy. Every night, Mia prayed and asked Mommy in heaven to let the angel lady visit her. Elena felt her chest tighten, and her arms instinctively came around the small, trembling body, holding her close, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Mia, I missed you too," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "Are you feeling well? Are you sleeping better?" Mia lifted her head, her gray eyes sparkling like starlight. "Mia is very well. Look, Mia still keeps your handkerchief," she said proudly, lifting it for Elena to see. "Mia sleeps with it every night. Rosa says Mia should wash it, but Mia will not because Mia does not want to lose the angel smell." Elena laughed softly, a real smile brightening her tired face, and only realized she was crying when Mia raised a small hand to wipe the tears from her cheek. "Are you hurt?" the little girl asked, panic edging her voice. "Who hurt you?" Then Mia turned toward Dominic, her voice suddenly fierce. "Papa, someone hurt the angel lady. Papa, make them go away." Dominic did not answer his daughter. He stood frozen, his gray eyes fixed on the sight before him, Elena holding Mia in her arms, the two of them wrapped around each other as if they belonged, and on Mia's lips was a smile, a true smile, radiant and innocent, a smile he had not seen in 4 years, not since the day Isabella died in his arms from a bullet meant for him, not since Mia had retreated into silence and fear, clinging to him as though terrified he too would vanish. 4 years he had hired the finest child therapists, bought every expensive toy, done everything a father could do, yet none of it brought back his daughter's joy. And now, this woman he had met only twice, a fragile waitress with nothing but an old handkerchief to her name, had accomplished what all his wealth and power could not. "Papa, can the angel lady stay with us?" Mia asked, hope shimmering in her eyes. "Can she read to Mia every night? She sings beautifully, Papa, like Mommy did." Something inside Dominic cracked, perhaps the wall he had built around his heart, perhaps the grief he had buried since Isabella's death, and he looked at Elena, this slender woman with a bandage on her head and a bruise on her cheek, meeting his gaze with wary blue-gray eyes that softened only when they drifted to Mia, and in that moment Dominic understood that she was not Isabella, she was not anyone he had ever known, yet she had made his daughter smile, and for a man like Dominic Valentino, that was more precious than anything on earth. Rosa led Mia back to her bedroom after the little girl yawned, and her eyes began to flutter shut even as she struggled to stay awake to be near her angel lady a little longer, and Elena promised she would see Mia again, knowing this time it was not an empty promise. Watching the small figure disappear behind the door with a warmth blooming in her chest, she had forgotten how to feel, but the quiet moment did not last long, because Marco strode into the room, his scarred face tighter than usual, his eyes immediately seeking Dominic and signaling that something serious needed to be said in private. "Say it," Dominic instructed without moving from where he stood. "Miss Carter should hear this as well." Marco hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. "Bad news, sir. The Moreno family has learned about Miss Carter." Elena saw Dominic's entire body tense, his gray eyes darkening like a storm rolling across the sky, and although she did not yet understand the details, her instincts sharpened by years of hardship told her this was no trivial matter. "How did they find out?" Dominic asked, his voice frigid. "We are still investigating," Marco replied, "but it appears someone at the hospital talked, and word spread that a woman saved the life of Dominic Valentino's daughter, and Victor Moreno took a particular interest in that piece of information." Marco cast an apologetic glance at Elena. "He has already had people look into her. He knows where she lives, where she works, and he knows about her siblings." Elena felt her blood freeze. "Who is Victor Moreno?" she asked, though she kept her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Dominic turned to her with an expression that held something close to regret. "Victor Moreno is the head of the Moreno Mafia family, the greatest enemy my family has. Our families have fought over territory in Chicago for 20 years. He is the one who ordered the killing of my wife 4 years ago." The final words stunned Elena into silence as she remembered hearing that Dominic was a widower and that Mia had lost her mother. She had not imagined that death to be tied to this brutal world. "What does he want with me?" Elena asked, though she already knew before Marco spoke. "He wants to use you as leverage against the boss," Marco said grimly. "He knows you matter to Mia, and Mia is the boss's only weakness, and he will use you as a pawn, kidnap you or threaten you to force concessions during upcoming territory negotiations." Elena rose to her feet, the dizziness nearly gone but her mind spinning for an entirely different reason. "I am just a waitress. I have nothing to do with any of this. Why would they target me?" "Because you saved Mia," Dominic said, his voice heavy. In this world that is enough to make you a target. Anyone connected to me becomes prey in the eyes of my enemies, which is why I have no friends and no family besides Mia, which is why I tried to keep you at a distance." Elena let out a bitter breath. "Yet you watched me, sent people after me, brought me here. Because I had no choice," Dominic snapped, his self-control cracking for the first time. "You think I want to drag you into this chaos? You think I want to watch one more innocent person hurt because of me?" The room fell into a strained quiet, and Elena looked at the man before her, the feared Mafia boss, and saw not ruthlessness but the sorrow of someone who had lost too much. "So what now?" she asked, calmer than she felt. "Now," Dominic said, "you cannot go back to your old life. Not until I deal with Victor Moreno. You and your siblings need protection, and the safest place for you is here with me." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to say she could handle herself, but she thought of Lucas and Lily and the danger that might reach them because she had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had risked her life to save one child, and now had to face the consequences. "I need to see my brother and sister," she said finally. "I need to explain." 3 days after the night at the Valentino estate, Elena returned to her routine as if nothing had happened, refusing Dominic's offer to stay, refusing the security team he wanted to assign her, refusing everything except one condition. She allowed Dominic's men to inspect her apartment and install new locks, the furthest extent her pride could tolerate. Lucas asked why strangers had come, why she had bruises on her face, and she lied, saying she had fallen and that the men were building maintenance workers, though she saw in his doubtful eyes that he did not believe her but chose not to press, having long grown used to Elena hiding truths to shield her siblings and resenting it even as he accepted it. Life continued, shift after shift, while Elena tried to ignore Dominic's warnings about Victor Moreno, telling herself she was ordinary and no one would bother kidnapping her, that Dominic exaggerated the danger, yet she could not shake the prickling on the back of her neck on the street, nor ignore the unfamiliar black car parked near the diner, nor forget the man smoking across from her building each morning. On Wednesday afternoon, Elena finished her office cleaning shift early because Lily had a medical appointment, and she was walking briskly through familiar streets, thinking about medicine costs and unpaid bills, when a black van screeched to a stop beside her, the door sliding open as 2 men jumped out with such speed that Elena barely had time to inhale. One grabbed her arm, the other pressed a cloth reeking of chemicals over her mouth, and she struggled desperately, kicking, clawing, biting, but the men were too strong, too practiced, dragging her toward the yawning black doorway of the van that felt like the mouth of a beast. The world blurred under the assault of the chemical fumes, and Elena's mind raced to Lucas and Lily, to the terror of what would happen to them if she vanished, who would buy Lily's medication, who would help Lucas reach college, and tears streamed down her cheeks not for herself but for the ones she loved. Then suddenly the pressure on her body vanished. Gunshots cracked through the air, shouts erupted, bones snapped. Someone called her name, and Elena collapsed onto the pavement, her vision swimming as she forced her eyes open. The 2 kidnappers were on the ground, one shot in the leg, the other pinned beneath a massive man Elena recognized as one of Dominic's men, while the van peeled away, abandoning them, and standing in the center of the chaos, gray eyes blazing with worry she had never imagined on his cold face, was Dominic Valentino. "Elena," he called, kneeling beside her, lifting her head with strong hands, checking her for injuries. "Can you hear me? Are you hurt?" Elena nodded weakly as her lungs fought to clear the chemical fumes. I am fine," she whispered hoarsely. "Lucas, Lily, safe," Dominic answered immediately. "My men are with them." And he exhaled, though rage still burned behind his eyes. "I told you, Moreno does not play games. He will not stop until he gets what he wants." Elena closed her eyes as tears slid down her temples, realizing how foolish she had been, thinking she could protect herself as always. But this was not Derek or alleyway bullies. This was the Mafia, trained killers, and she had never stood a chance alone. "I am sorry," she whispered through trembling breath. "I was wrong. I did not want to involve you, but I cannot let Lucas and Lily be in danger. Please, please help me protect them. I will do anything." Dominic's eyes softened, and he reached up to gently wipe her tears with his thumb. "You do not need to apologize, and you do not need to do anything in return," he said quietly. "I will protect you and your siblings, not because you owe me, but because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because it is the right thing to do." Elena looked into his eyes, and for the first time since her mother died, she felt herself trusting a man. "Thank you," she whispered. Dominic nodded, then lifted her into his arms as though she weighed nothing. "Let us go home," he said, and Elena did not know why, but when he said the word home, it felt like a promise. That afternoon, a black SUV brought Elena, Lucas, and Lily to the Valentino estate, along with a few small bags that contained everything the three siblings owned. And Lucas sat in silence the entire ride, his brown eyes fixed on the window with attention he could not hide, because he had listened to Elena explain the entire story, the accident, Dominic Valentino, the threat from the Moreno family, the attempted abduction earlier that day, and he had wanted to shout that his sister had lost her mind by involving herself with the Mafia, that they should run away to another city instead of walking willingly into the lion's den. But then he looked at Lily beside him, her eyes bright with excitement as the car approached the gates of the lavish estate, and he swallowed every objection, because Lily needed expensive medication each month. Lily needed a warm, safe place to live. Lily needed to be protected, and if staying near a Mafia boss could give her that, then Lucas would accept it even if he hated every part of this. The guest house of the Valentino estate was larger than their old apartment by at least 5 times, with 2 floors, 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room with a real fireplace, a fully equipped kitchen, and a small private garden looking out onto the main estate grounds. And Lily ran from room to room like a freed bird, squealing with delight at the sight of the bathtub, the large bed with white duvets, the refrigerator full of food, while Elena stood in the living room unsure of what to feel because she had grown used to moldy, cramped spaces, to sleeping on a frayed sofa, to counting every coin before buying groceries, and all this luxury felt wrong on her shoulders like clothing that belonged to someone else. Rosa appeared in the doorway with a warm smile carrying a tray of fresh cookies and hot chocolate, welcoming them with her honey-toned Mexican voice, urging them to treat this place as home and to ask her for anything they might need. And Lily immediately ran to her, eyes wide as she inhaled the scent of the cookies, while Rosa gently scolded Elena for being too thin and assured her no one in this house would ever go hungry. Before Elena could respond, Mia came running in, gray eyes sparkling the moment she saw Elena, shouting, "Angel Lady," as she flung herself into Elena's arms, before spotting Lily and tilting her head curiously at the girl only a few years older than she was. Lily introduced herself with a beaming smile and told Mia that Elena had told her many things about her, and Mia turned to Elena with astonishment and delight, asking if it was true, and when Elena nodded, the 2 children began chatting as if they had known each other forever. Running outside to the garden hand in hand, Rosa watched them with gentle affection and explained that Mia had not played with another child since Isabella died, that she kept to herself and only spoke to Dominic or Rosa, and Elena watched Mia laughing in the flowers with Lily and felt something warm unfurl inside her chest, something like hope. Lucas stood beside her, still wary but less tense now that Lily was smiling, and he whispered that he did not trust Dominic but would stay for Lily and for Elena, and Elena squeezed his hand gratefully before Rosa invited them to dinner with Dominic and Mia, and bustled off to prepare lasagna. That night, Elena could not sleep despite the softest bed she had ever felt, and the warm fire glowing in the corner, because her mind kept returning to the attempted kidnapping, the cold eyes of the attackers, the chemical-soaked cloth over her mouth, and the terrifying truth of what would have happened if Dominic had not arrived in time. And she lay awake until 2 in the morning before slipping quietly outside. The garden was lit by small, hidden lamps casting a fairy-tale glow across the stone path, and Elena walked among the flowers until she stopped at the marble fountain, sitting on a cold stone bench as she looked at the star-filled sky, only then realizing she was not alone. Dominic stood beneath an old maple tree with a glass of wine in his hand, his gray eyes fixed on some distant memory, dressed in a white shirt with the collar undone and sleeves rolled up, looking nothing like the cold, untouchable figure she had seen before, but instead, like a man haunted by ghosts. She approached slowly, and he spoke without turning, asking if she could not sleep either, and she admitted her mind was too full, and he nodded, saying he understood because he had not slept through a night since Isabella died. The name hung heavy between them until he began to speak again, telling her he had met his wife when he was 25, that she had been the daughter of a lawyer with no ties to his world, beautiful, intelligent, stubborn enough to stay by his side despite the danger, believing love was worth the risk, and he said with a breaking voice that she had been right, because she had risked her life for him. He told Elena how Isabella had died shielding him from a bullet meant for his head during an ambush ordered by Victor Moreno, how she died in his arms in front of a 2-year-old Mia, and Elena placed a gentle hand on his arm because she could not bear the pain she heard in his voice. Then she told her own story, of losing her mother to cancer, of fighting every day and every night to give her one more hour, one more breath, yet still losing her, and afterward falling into the arms of Derek at her weakest, believing his empty promises until he turned into a violent captor, controlling and isolating her until she finally escaped one rainy night with 2 siblings and a few $100s. They fell silent then, 2 people from opposite worlds tied together by wounds no one else could see, and Dominic told her she was stronger than she believed, that she had endured and survived and still managed to love, and she told him he was a good father who carried unimaginable guilt but never stopped protecting Mia. He reached out his hand then, and she let him take hers, and they stood together in the cold, quiet night, fingers intertwined, and for the first time in a very long time neither of them felt alone. 2 weeks had passed since the quiet night in the garden, and life inside the Valentino estate had begun to settle into a rhythm Elena never expected to grow familiar with, because although she continued working at Rosie's diner, there was now a car sent to fetch her and security assigned to walk her in and out. Lucas had started adapting to the new home, spending most of his time in the estate library preparing for college entrance exams, and Lily and Mia had become inseparable, sharing every childish secret and playing together from dawn to dusk. Yet the person who stayed closest to Elena was none other than Mia herself, the 6-year-old with storm-gray eyes who followed her everywhere like a small shadow. Each morning, Mia rushed to the guest house to eat breakfast with her before school. Each afternoon, she waited at the door with 100 stories to tell the moment Elena returned. And each night she refused to sleep, unless Elena read to her and sang the lullaby her mother once sang, curling into Elena's lap with her soft, dark hair smelling faintly of children's shampoo, and her small fingers clinging to Elena's sleeve as if afraid she might disappear. One weekend afternoon, Rosa taught Elena and the girls how to make cookies in the sprawling kitchen, and with Lily also joining the lesson, the 4 of them turned the room into a delightful chaos of flying flour and echoed laughter, while Mia stood on a stool stretching her tiny hands to cut dough into star shapes, tongue sticking out in concentration as she proudly presented a lopsided piece to Elena, who crouched down to help shape it properly. Then Mia spoke of her mother, saying Rosa had told her she used to bake with her, and that her mother now watched her from the sky, before lifting her gaze and telling Elena in the most innocent, earnest voice that she now had Ellie. And she asked the question that made Elena's breath falter, asking if Ellie could stay with her forever, because she did not want Ellie to leave the way her mother had, and Elena knelt and wiped the flour from Mia's cheek and promised she would not go anywhere, and Mia flung her arms around her, whispering that she loved her, that Ellie was like her second mama, before murmuring the words that shattered Elena's heart wide open. Ellie mama. And Elena froze with tears spilling uncontrollably as she held the small, warm child to her chest, crying not from sorrow, but from a happiness so sharp it hurt. And when Mia saw the tears, she cried too, wiping Elena's cheeks with flour-covered hands while leaving white streaks on both their faces, unaware that Dominic had been standing at the doorway for a long time watching the entire scene. From the moment Mia called Elena Ellie Mama to the moment they clung to each other in tears, and for the first time in 4 years, the cold steel heart of Chicago's most feared Mafia boss, stung with warmth and grief so fierce, it blurred his vision, and he slipped away quietly with a decision already carved into him that he would protect Elena Carter at any cost, not only because she had saved Mia, but because she had given his daughter something he could never give, the love of a mother. The next morning, the atmosphere in the estate shifted sharply, and Elena noticed it as soon as she stepped out of the guest house. Because the number of guards had doubled and their expressions were taut, Rosa hurried Mia and Lily back inside, insisting they stay indoors. Lucas was told not to leave the guest house, and Dominic had shut himself in his office since dawn with Marco and a stream of men moving in and out with grave faces. No one told Elena anything, and when Rosa only shook her head anxiously, Elena's unease grew until just before noon she decided to find out for herself, approaching Dominic's office, only to freeze outside the half-open door, when she heard Marco's voice revealing that Victor Moreno had obtained photographs taken that morning of Elena, Lucas, and Lily walking from the guest house to the main estate, and he had sent a message calling Elena Dominic's little bird, and threatening that it would be a shame if something happened to her and the 2 children, demanding the Southport territory in exchange, or he would send Dominic their remains piece by piece, and Elena went cold to the bone, leaning against the wall, trying to steady her breath. Inside the room, Dominic's voice cut like ice as he ordered an end to the matter, saying Moreno had killed his wife 4 years earlier and now threatened the one person Mia loved, and that the time had come to finish it. And when Marco asked for instructions, Dominic said that tonight Victor Moreno would die. Elena pushed the door open then, unable to stand still another second, and both men turned in shock as she stepped inside, trembling yet resolute, asking if he truly intended to kill a man, and Dominic dismissed Marco before facing her, trying to explain that she did not understand. But she forced him to explain why this had to happen, why there was no other way, and Dominic told her with a raw edge that Moreno had taken Isabella, had attempted to kill Mia by sabotaging the car, and was now threatening to butcher Elena and her siblings, asking her what she expected him to do, sit and wait for Moreno to strike first. Elena told him she did not want him to stain his hands with blood because of her, that she had seen too much violence in her life and did not want to be the reason he killed again. And Dominic said she was not the reason because Moreno should have died long ago, and she was merely the drop that overflowed the glass. But Elena stepped closer, crying as she asked what kind of man he would become if he killed again, how Mia would grow up knowing her father's hands were red, begging him to tell her there was another path. Dominic stood rigid as if every word she spoke pierced him, and when she placed his hand against her wet cheek telling him not to shut her out, not to carry this alone, that if he wanted to do this for her she deserved to know. Dominic looked into her tear-blurred eyes and felt the walls he had built for years tremble, because he was not accustomed to someone crying for him, fearing for him, standing with him, and in that moment he no longer knew how to breathe. The room lay steeped in a heavy silence, broken only by their unsteady breathing and the soft crackle of the fireplace, and Dominic remained where he stood with his hand resting on Elena's cheek, feeling the warm tears slipping through his fingers as something inside him warred between the instinct to pull away and rebuild the wall she had broken, and the deeper inability to do so, and his voice turned rough as he said she did not understand, that she did not understand how he had lived since Isabella died, how every night when he closed his eyes he saw her blood on his hands, saw the light leave her gaze, heard Mia crying for a mother who would never answer, and how he had sworn never again to let anyone he cared for die because of him. And Elena looked at him with her heart aching at the raw anguish in his storm-gray eyes, and asked why he had let her into his life, why he had allowed her to remain here, allowed Mia to call her Ellie Mama, allowed her to believe she might belong to this place. And Dominic's voice cracked like shattered glass as he erupted with the truth that he could not stop himself, that she thought he wanted this but did not understand how every morning he woke thinking of her, how watching her hold his daughter stirred something he had believed dead for 4 long years, that he had tried to keep his distance and remind himself that she was only someone to whom he owed a debt. Yet she had broken every barrier he had built and now he was afraid, and when Elena whispered what he feared, he looked straight into her eyes without hiding, and said he feared losing her, feared watching her die in his arms the way Isabella had, feared Mia losing another precious person, and feared the intensity of what he felt for her because it was stronger than anything he had ever known. Elena could not speak, could only stand there looking at the man the city feared, now stripped of armor and vulnerability, and she did not know who moved first when their lips finally touched. The first kiss not gentle nor sweet like fairy tales but forged from pain and longing, from years of loneliness and the terror of abandonment, and Dominic kissed her as though she were air, and he was drowning while Elena kissed him back as if it were the last warmth she would ever know. And when they parted both breathless with their foreheads pressed together, she whispered that she would not let him kill because of her, that there had to be another way. But Dominic told her there was none with Moreno, because the man would not stop until one of them was dead, and Elena only nodded as if accepting something unspoken before leaving his office, with a heart weighted with dread while a different plan formed inside her mind, because she would not allow Dominic's hands to be stained with more blood for her, and she would not let this war continue endangering those she loved, and if Victor Moreno wanted her, then she would give him exactly what he wanted. That night, after the entire estate had fallen asleep, she quietly took the phone of a guard dozing in the hallway, searched through the call logs for unfamiliar numbers, and finally sent a message saying she was Elena Carter and wanted to meet Victor Moreno alone, to exchange herself for the safety of the Valentino family and her siblings, telling him to name a location, and the reply came within 5 minutes, with an address in the abandoned Southern Industrial District, and the instruction to arrive within 1 hour alone, or the agreement was void. Elena wrote a letter and left it on Dominic's pillow, knowing he would find it when he checked on Mia, as he did every night. And in that letter she apologized and said she could not allow him to spill more blood because of her, that she would resolve this herself, asking him to care for Mia, Lucas, and Lily, promising she would return if things went well, and asking him, should she not survive, to tell Mia her Ellie Mama loved her very much, and she confessed that she loved him though she had never said it aloud. She slipped out through a blind spot in the security system she had discovered while playing hide-and-seek with the girls, ran into the cold, called a taxi, and gave the driver Moreno's address, and when the car stopped before a deserted warehouse, Elena understood she was stepping into the lion's jaws yet did not turn back. walking instead toward the half-open metal door and vanishing into the dark without knowing. 2 shadows stepped out behind her to intercept the taxi, or that the entire meeting was a trap, with no intention from Moreno to honor any bargain. And the last thing she registered was a sharp blow to the back of her skull and a man's cold laughter telling her she was foolish for thinking she could walk away. Dominic could not sleep with their kiss still burning on his lips and her words echoing in his mind. And at 2 a.m. he rose to check on Mia and saw the letter on his pillow, his heart stopping as he read the trembling script again and again. Before he tore from the room like a storm, shouting for Marco and ordering everyone awake because Elena had gone to meet Moreno alone, and the estate exploded into chaos with lights and running footsteps and ringing phones, as Marco arrived pale-faced reporting he had traced the signal from the phone she used to contact Moreno to the abandoned industrial district, warehouse number 7, and Dominic commanded every man available to prepare while ordering Marco to call Agent Rodriguez from the FBI and tell him Dominic would deliver Victor Moreno on a silver platter in exchange for immunity for his family. The fleet of black cars tore through Chicago's night like a streak of rage and fear, Dominic gripping his gun with only one thought in his mind: Elena, who had risked herself for him and Mia and those she loved, doing what Isabella had done 4 years earlier, and Dominic swore he would not allow history to repeat itself. Warehouse number 7 stood decrepit in the desolate district with Moreno's men surrounding it, but Dominic had more soldiers and had something Moreno lacked: the desperation of a man on the brink of losing someone he loved, and the gunfight erupted fiercely, with shattering glass and ricocheting bullets, as Dominic led the charge like a feral creature, cutting down every guard in his path, oblivious to danger and focused solely on reaching Elena. He found her in the basement tied to a chair with dried blood on her forehead and her lips swollen, while Victor Moreno stood beside her with a gun to her head, smiling with venom as he mocked Dominic for arriving quickly and taunted him about letting his wife die. And Dominic leveled his weapon with every muscle pulled taut while meeting Elena's tear-blurred gaze, trying to tell him not to worry. And he demanded Moreno drop the gun because his men were defeated and the FBI was coming. But Moreno laughed that he did not fear federal agents and would kill the girl before doing anything else. Yet his words were cut short by a gunshot from behind, as Marco slipped through the back entrance and hit Moreno in the shoulder, sending him crashing down as Dominic kicked the weapon away and seized him by the collar with hell-cold eyes, confessing he should kill him and make him suffer as Isabella had. But when Elena's trembling voice begged him not to, Dominic froze, remembering her plea not to stain himself further, and he looked at Moreno and then at Elena being freed by Marco and made his decision, declaring he would not kill the man because death was far too merciful, sentencing him instead to live out his days imprisoned with every crime imaginable stacked upon him. And he handed Moreno to Marco to deliver to the FBI before rushing to Elena, falling to his knees and touching her bruised face with shaking hands, whispering that she was insane, that she had almost died and almost left him alone. And Elena smiled weakly, apologizing for trying to stop him from carrying more blood. And Dominic held her tightly, promising she must never do such a thing again because he could not lose her. And when she whispered he had not killed Moreno, he answered that it was because of her, all because of her, and he kissed her forehead and her eyes and her cheeks and her mouth, vowing to protect her forever and never let anyone harm her again. And in the ruined warehouse with police sirens approaching, they held each other and wept, 2 souls finally finding one another in the dark. 6 months had passed since the terrifying night at the warehouse, and Elena Carter's life had changed in ways she had never dared to dream. Victor Moreno was now serving a life sentence in federal prison for dozens of crimes ranging from human trafficking to murder, and the shadow that had hovered over the Valentino family had finally dissolved, while Derek Shaw no longer posed a threat either, having been expelled from Chicago and barred by court order from going near Elena under warning of consequences no one wished to imagine. Elena continued working at Rosie's diner, not because she needed the money but because she chose to, for the little diner with its cracked leather stools and faded floors had become part of who she was, a place where she found meaning in her small connections with Mr. Kowalski, Mrs. Nguyen, and Tony. And though Dominic had asked her dozens of times to quit, she refused each time with the stubborn smile he had grown to love, telling him she needed the job to remind herself of where she came from, and to never forget the hard years that had shaped her. Alongside her shifts at the diner, she had enrolled in an online nursing program, pursuing the dream she had set aside when her mother passed away, and Dominic had paid the entire tuition, a gesture Elena accepted without protest because she had learned that allowing someone to love her was, in its own way, an act of love in return. Each night, after Mia fell asleep, Elena would sit at Dominic's office desk studying anatomy while he reviewed business reports, the two of them sharing the kind of peaceful silence that felt like home. Lucas had received his acceptance letter to MIT with a full scholarship, a dream he had once believed he must abandon because of their circumstances. And when he read that letter, he cried for the first time since their mother died, and Elena held him, whispering that their mother would be proud. Though Lucas remained cautious of Dominic, he had begun calling him by name instead of the cold Mr. Valentino, and sometimes they even watched basketball together on Saturday nights. Lily was the one who transformed the most. With proper medication and good nutrition, her asthma was fully under control. Her cheeks glowed with color, her eyes sparkled, and her laughter rang through the mansion every day as she and Mia became sisters not by blood but by choice, sharing everything from dolls to secrets, and each called Elena by different names that meant the same thing, Lily calling her sister, and Mia calling her Ellie Mama. On the first warm spring weekend afternoon, as tulips bloomed in the garden and sunlight washed the estate in gold, Elena sat on the stone bench beside the fountain watching the people she loved gathered around her. Lucas teaching Lily how to play badminton on the lawn, the two children's laughter chiming like bells while Mia ran between them begging to play despite being too small to hold a racket, and Rosa stood on the porch wiping her hands on a cloth, gently scolding them not to fall while her eyes gleamed with joy, and beside Elena sat Dominic with his hand intertwined with hers as naturally as breathing. They did not speak, simply watched the children play, and tears pricked Elena's eyes from the sheer force of happiness as she remembered freezing nights in a rundown apartment, skipped meals so she could buy Lily's medicine, and the bruises Derek had left on her body. Realizing how far she had traveled from the exhausted girl who had worked 18 hours a day to survive, to the woman now sitting here loved, protected, and belonging. When Dominic asked what she was thinking, brushing his thumb over the back of her hand, Elena turned to him with tear-filled eyes and said she was thinking about how strange life was, how if she had not run outside into the cold November night, if she had ignored that car, if she had not saved Mia, she had no idea where she would be now. And Dominic replied that she would still be herself, a good, resilient, loving person, and that he was only lucky she had chosen to save his daughter that night. But Elena smiled and said it was not luck, it was fate, then rested her head on his shoulder as she gazed at the sunlit garden. Mia ran to her, throwing herself into Elena's lap, followed by Lily and then Lucas, who stood beside them wearing the rare soft smile he saved only for family. And Rosa came out carrying a tray of cold lemonade. They stood there, a peculiar family forged not by blood but by love and sacrifice and the choices made in their hardest moments. And Elena knew she had finally found the place she belonged. The story of Elena and Dominic had come to an end, but the lesson it left behind remained, reminding us that life often brings trials that feel impossible to overcome, and nights so long we fear no light will ever return, yet a small act of kindness can alter a life forever, not just another's but our own. Elena had saved Mia not for reward but because it was the right thing to do, and that simple act opened the door to a happiness she had never imagined. This story also reminds us that family is not defined solely by blood, but by those who choose to love and protect each other. And wherever you are in your life, whatever burdens you carry, remember that there is always a light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes angels reveal themselves in the form of ordinary people. Thank you for staying with this story until the final moment. If the journey of Elena and Dominic has touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it so more people can hear stories as meaningful as this one. We would love to know how this story made you feel, whether it reminded you of anything in your own life, or whether you have ever met unexpected angels along your path. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, as we always treasure hearing the honest emotions that come from the depths of your hearts. Wishing all of you good health, joy, and peace each day. And remember that you deserve love, and sometimes happiness arrives from the places we least expect. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.